Oil runs the world right now. Countries with rich oil reserves are leading economies and export crude oil and oil products to increase their wealth. The wealthiest nations in the world right now are all thanks to the petrodollars they earn in exchange for oil. And until these levels deplete, these countries will remain superpowers. US, Russia, and Saudi Arabia are currently the top oil-rich nations, and countries around the world depend on one of them or the other for their fuel requirements. Recent fuel hikes seen all over the world have created a tangled situation among the petroleum-rich countries like the US and Saudi Arabia. To bring the fuel price down, the US has been pressuring Saudi Arabia and the UAE to increase their oil production, but they are openly reluctant. What are the reasons behind this situation? Watch the video till the end as we tell you all the details about why the Saudis won't produce more oil. But before we do, make sure to like this video and subscribe to our channel so that you don't miss out on any of the amazing content we have in store for you. Saudi oil discovery and production. Before oil was discovered in Saudi Arabia, most of the population was primarily nomadic and earned a living through farming and herding. The arid climate only allowed a small variety of cereals and date farming. Their social life was simple, and lack of wealth meant no real progress or social development in the country. Starvation was rampant in the harsh climate, and the main sources of income were construction and vocational trades. Many would travel to far-off lands and countries, searching for employment and bringing back food and products in return for the labor-intensive work. It wasn't until 1938 when the kingdom struck gold, and the world's largest oil reserves were discovered in Saudi Arabia. An American-owned oil well in Dhahran, Saudi Arabia, drilled into what would soon be identified as the largest source of petroleum in the world. The discovery radically changed the physical, human, and political geography of Saudi Arabia, the Middle East, and the world. Currently, the country holds 266 billion barrels of proven oil reserves as of 2016, which is 221.2 times its annual consumption. This figure means the country accounts for 16.2% of the global oil reserves. Major importers of Saudi oil are countries like Japan, the US, China, and India. But since Saudi isn't the only oil producer nation, it, along with several other oil-producing countries, are members of an alignment that enables fair and stable prices for petroleum producer nations. This organization is called OPEC. OPEC. The Organization of the Petroleum Exporting Countries, or the OPEC, is intragovernmental, comprising 13 nations, namely Algeria, Angola, Congo, Ecuador, Equatorial Guinea, Gabon, Iran, Iraq, Kuwait, Libya, Nigeria, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates, and Venezuela. Russia is the world-leading oil-exporting nation. Although it isn't formally a member of OPEC, it has coordinated oil production since 2016 with the organization, so Russia has somewhat dominated the oil market. OPEC controls more than half of the world's crude oil input. Formed in September of 1960 in Iraq, its primary goal was to prevent its members, the largest oil producers, refiners, and marketers, from lowering the oil price. They would work in coordination to gain greater control over petroleum prices. OPEC works by charter where each member state has one vote, and the oil supply agreements among the members require unanimous consent of all. Since Saudi Arabia is the largest producer with the most unused production capacity in OPEC, it enjoys a prominent role in the organization. The current oil production of OPEC is at a level of 28 million barrels per day. U.S. oil production. Oil discovery in the U.S. predates the current and the previous century. American oil history began in a valley along a creek in remote northwestern Pennsylvania. Today's exploration and production industry was born on August 27, 1859, near Titusville, when a well drilled explicitly for oil found it. Following its discovery, the oil industry became a major source of income for the country. Currently, 32 of the 50 states in the U.S. produce oil, with Texas as the leading state, followed by the offshore federal zone of the Gulf of Mexico, North Dakota, New Mexico, Oklahoma, Colorado, and Alaska. Even when the country produces more than 18 million barrels of oil per day, which maintains its position as one of the top oil-producing nations, it isn't sufficient enough for its needs. You see, the USA is a big country with quite a lot of population, so it requires more oil to keep the country running. Here comes the tricky part. The oil necessity makes the U.S. import oil from abroad from countries like Canada, Saudi Arabia, Mexico, Venezuela, and Nigeria. Since the costs for drilling oil out of the ground are so much cheaper in some countries, it makes oil import and shipping cost less than what it would cost the U.S. to drill oil from within the country. U.S.-Saudi Arabia relations. The U.S. is Saudi Arabia's largest trading partner, and Saudi Arabia is the largest U.S. export market in the Middle East. The United States and Saudi Arabia have a history of technical and educational exchange, which has benefited both nations, and the long-standing security relationship continues to be important. In recent years, we have seen a strained relationship between the two countries. During the Obama administration, this major decline was witnessed. However, the Trump administration brought back some of the strength in their relationship, as President Trump himself visited the country during his tenure in 2017. The October 2018 assassination of a Saudi dissident and Washington Post journalist, Jamal Khashoggi, in a Saudi consulate in Turkey, caused a severe rift between the countries. The United States sanctioned some Saudi nationals. Congress unsuccessfully attempted to cut off U.S. weapons sales to Saudi Arabia related to the war in Yemen, due to opposition from the Trump administration. Turkish authorities and U.S. intelligence agencies concluded the killing was done on the order of Mohammed bin Salman, the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia. The Saudi royals, however, entirely deny these allegations. The current Biden administration of the U.S. has refused to deal with the Crown Prince directly. The Saudi war against Houthis in Yemen. Yemen is one of the Arab world's poorest countries and has become more violent since this year. The country is under civil war led by the Houthis. They want government accountability, an end to corruption, regular utilities, fair fuel prices, job opportunities for local Yemenis, and no Western influence. Now, the Saudis are disliked by Houthis, saying that they funded and pressured the Yemeni President Saleh's government in 2004 to crack down on their own community, which the Saudis deny. In 2015, Saudi Arabia, with a coalition of 9 other countries, launched an intervention in Yemen at the request of the Yemeni President Abdrabbuh Mansur Hadi. They provide Yemen with military support against the Houthis movement. This support has caused Saudi Arabia some backlash from the Houthis too. The rebels have carried out a series of attacks on Saudi Arabia after state media in the kingdom reported rocket and drone strikes targeting an oil depot in Jeddah and other facilities in Riyadh. Saudi reservations about producing more oil. Saudi Arabia feels the U.S. is ignoring its security concerns. The kingdom has asked for more help confronting Houthis in Yemen. Biden stopped supporting offensive operations for the Saudi-led war in that country. The Saudis have somewhat felt ignored by the U.S., as it no longer responds to the attacks led by the rebels on the Saudi kingdom. So, as a result, the Saudis deny the request of Biden to pump more oil to decrease the soaring oil prices throughout the world. Also, to pump more oil means they will have to go against the OPEC agreements and take on the opposition of Russia. Plus, keeping the prices high only benefits the producer nations and brings in more petrodollars. So it's all very complicated for the world leaders to decide what steps to take and what to avoid to keep peace with other nations. Effects of the pandemic and the Russia-Ukraine war situation on the oil industry. The COVID-19 pandemic came and all hell broke loose across every field in the world. Along with millions of deaths that were caused by the pandemic, so many big companies faced serious supply chain issues, with many having to shut down completely. So many people lost their jobs and the security of a stable life. Strict lockdowns and stay-at-home orders imposed across the world caused oil consumption to fall by about 30%. OPEC flooded the world with an increased supply of cheap oil to tackle this collapse in the oil prices. The combination of decreased demand and increased OPEC production caused crude oil prices to drop from $64 to $18.47 between January and April of 2020. On top of that, when Russia invaded the Ukraine, the European nations, along with the U.S., imposed severe bans and sanctions on Russia and stopped the import of Russian gas and oil unless they backed away from the invasion. Now, since Russia doesn't seem to want to back away, the lack of Russian oil on which the European nations are so dependent has caused a need for fuel to rise. Until they come up with greener solutions and come out of the fossil fuel dependency, the U.S. has called on the Arab oil-rich nations to pump more oil into the market, which we have previously discussed. Global oil price increase. Now, the lack of oil in the world market due to the Russian invasion of Ukraine, paired up with the increased demand for it after the reopening of the post-pandemic world, has caused soaring high oil prices. When the demand is less than supply, prices fall. It is also true for the opposite scenario, like today when there is a high demand for oil and less supply of it in the market. Experts believe it is true that suppliers earn more from these high prices, but it's not always about making hefty profits. Geopolitical risk has re-entered the fray, and markets are sensitive to the news of tensions ramping up or slowing down. The supply and demand dynamics need to change if we want to see a significant drop in global petroleum prices. Well, that's it for today's video. We hope that you learned something from the video. If you did, please show your appreciation by clicking the like button. Subscribe to our channel for future amazing videos, and don't forget to turn on the notification bell so that you get notified whenever we upload new informative content. In the end, thanks for watching and see you next time.